you. And
Elizabeth Ann Sokolow, poetry editor of the newsletter for the Society for Literature and Science, has been writing about nature in her poetry since age 8. Her book, Laughing at Gravity, Conversations with Isaac Newton, won the Barnard Poetry Prize in 1987. She is widely published in such magazines as Plowshares, Nimrod, and Myth, was a founding member of the US One Poets Co-op, and a frequent editor of its magazine.
And we must thank Ellen Foose, who just spoke to you, and Susan Roth, who put this together. I know what it's like to try to get everything organized, and especially when we have the local TV station here as well. It is really quite a job, and Ellen carries it off with great grace. And not only Susan Roth, but the Arts Council of Princeton, with which I worked for 4 years, has been participating in the sponsorship of this. And it is really quite a coalition, and it's really quite wonderful to read under those auspices. I feel a little bit like an alum of US One, but also an alum of the high school that both Alicia and I attended together. Our first work on a literary magazine was when we were 15 or 17 years old. So I don't know that everybody knows that, but some people did. It goes back a long way. I have always been writing poems, it seems to me, about things that almost get away from the mind and the observation, liminal moments which explode with little revelations that, unless one noticed them and wrote them down, wouldn't be there at all. And given that it's a very short reading, actually, I picked out poems, all of which have that character. So I'm going to read from simpler to more dense. And the first one is just an observation. Anybody could have seen it, but I was lucky enough to have been there. It's called The Astonishing. Yesterday, a small child in pink tights and an orange frock with tiny sprays of purple flowers, holding her mother's hand, crossed the city street, stopped dead still to unzip her pink jacket, and would not move on. Her mother pulled at her, and all the glutted street of cars and buses, trucks, stayed silent. All the impatient drivers watched. Silent, the Japanese mother and child. The astonishing gesture and the colors were so clearly chosen. New York best, but colors from another country, colors no one had ever seen together before, and perhaps a country so far east and remote and unknown that no one except that child had been there before, with her mother who had miraculously conceived her. And as if we were all in a museum, the traffic did not move or honk or allow the child to be a success at suicide near Penn Station. However traditional Harry may have been in her country of origin, her mother talked her into moving across the street, the tiny girl's flat chest in her pink dress open to the February breeze. This is another one, but the movement is more in my mind than in what I observe. It's called Billboard, and this one, that was from New York, this one is from Detroit. All the ones I'm reading, I think, have been published, most of them in a place called Waysgoose, which is a most astonishing publication. A Waysgoose is a medieval festival with drinking and bardic activity, and we used to do that in Detroit, led by somebody called Lenore Langs, and here in the East we don't know about these things, but she was a remarkable person. She put 300 people together, and every year there was a magazine. So a lot of these were in there. This is Billboard. On the billboard, all white except for a red oval holding the black brand name, a ladder, where a figure perches day and at sunset so high up, arm extended, painting white everywhere, painstaking as an astronaut or acrobat, a mountain climber in the Himalayas of commerce, so slow in his task, daily covering almost no ground, at work on the right of the space above the rush of traffic moving beyond the speed limit. I wonder if he gets paid by the hour, indefinitely, if he is perhaps a painted figure himself, a dummy of perseverance placed at a great height, where others fear and fall. When I was in Detroit, my sister died. She was younger than I. And my dreams became incredibly florid. And it's very hard to write poems from dreams because dreams are more liminal than any other space at all, but it's very hard to catch them. So this is an attempt at that, and it was published in Ways. It was just after a sister's death. In the dream, what I thought was a window, giving an image of the purple and green surf beating on gray and purple wet rock, warmed by an orange sun that had set already out at sea, was a painting. And I argued it must be the sea, real, churning, and the host in that house smiled and sipped at some strong amber drink and said the painting would last and last, and the window on the sea would keep giving a changing view. Which would I prefer? And I kept insisting there was no choice, only reality, the real window, the real sea there, just there, something I wish I could paint now to last forever. It would keep me alive, could always take away the breath of anyone who saw it, those deep rocks, that remarkable curling surf, thick as green glass, but liquid, rolling, and rocks so purple and gray. If only I could paint it. Should bad times come again, it could be sold if one could bear to part with it. And I found myself having to look down as I spoke to the host. I wanted so much for the something to be real and permanent. I did not want to paint to sell. And before I woke, the host asked me to touch the paint, to smell it, to see there was not a window, and he asked me if I could paint a copy, asked me as if I could bear to part with you. At about that time also, this is also Detroit, there was a report about the sea of Lake Baikal. It's fresh water, it goes down a mile deep, it's in Siberia. It's the deepest lake in the world, and it has life forms that exist nowhere else. They are mostly transparent because since there's no light at the bottom, they don't need to have any color or anything else that obscures their being. And the name of the most useful fish is Galamanca, and I think the poem will explain why. It was polluted, the lake, and so it was very much in the news. Galamanca in Lake Baikal. It's not really a song. Is it going to stop? It's lovely. Okay. Galamanca and Lake Baikal. In cold, deep places and on white surfaces, creatures can be solitary. Little competition allows them the colors of rock and ice, snow and the translucence of rain. The polar bear, ivory against white snow, wanders alone, opposite the colorful birds of the tropics and the thousand-jeweled fish of the coral reefs in warm, salt water. The Galamanca does not school. Transparent, resisting pressure changes with its fatty cells in Siberia's cold, deep lake. The sounding of its whereabouts is muffled at a mile deep. This fish is never caught. Lake Baikal gives to Tibetan doctors only the shrouded dead washed on shore for medicine. Centuries of this healing, and now the fish are windows carrying messages. Help Lake Baikal sick from spillage. But it is difficult to clear away a past stained this deep. The week I grieve newly, a friend teaches me making coffee to use a paintbrush, soft, able to reach into all crevices, to clean the old bitter grounds from the grinder before shaking in new beans. Water cannot be brushed clean, needs a filter for 1,000,000 gallons, 1,000 times, 100 days. What are numbers compared to friendship? Alone, I would not have known so many things translucent in the dark, black, sweet water of a lake. A little change of pace. This is called Substitute, and it's about teaching as a substitute. I also work as an artist in the schools, and I always am amazed by high school students, but I don't have them on a regular basis. So this is called Substitute. When I am a substitute teacher in a desktop publishing class, where the girls come Fridays before football games, dressed in their cheerleading costumes, the long legs, the thin waists, these girls in this class I do not know, this Amanda, this Lisa, this Suzanne, they do not, I pray, know anything of the trajectory that can never carry me back to their age again, so that I will never be doing what they are doing, not just at their age, 15, 17, but never, never in my life. I, who in English class tell students that it is almost always wrong to write never, as in I will never eat broccoli again, must write, never will I fly through the air like this, slender and tender and smooth and hopeful and untouched by horror, as it seems they still are, though the news this week is encased in steel, and though I will try to make my waist a little more like theirs, live, inspired by the way they move, joyous, alive bodies flying toward earth, the future they move into, flying. No metaphor, this lightness, this robust trust, this careening through thin air, thick with cheers, precision and timing, this wanting their teams to win, this wanting not to let each other down, wanting arms of waiting girls to catch them, this knowing they will be caught by the larger, longer, solid, more muscular girls who will not drop them, the holding pattern of high school, this height, this hope, 12 feet off the ground, turning, this small young girl, her trunk, her legs moving as a diver moves, counting and counting on each other, and gravity always landing perfectly in the outstretched arms, the foundation of the tower, always there, waiting like earth itself, as a sleeve waits for the arm to enter, as a dying cat finds a sleeve, goes up, up to darkness, to the source of its living, that again. And another aspect of this sort of watching the mind do funny things in space where anything can happen is that sometimes when very terrible things happen, especially if you're as solitary as I tend to be, very strange thoughts come. And this, I do want to mention her name. It was a very great loss to the poetry community when Enid Dame, a wonderful poet, died at the age of 60. And a lot of people went to a memorial service for her, which was held in a tavern which she and her husband used to read at down in the NYU Lower East Side area. And so I parked on 13th Street and went to the memorial service, and we all read her poems. And this is a poem about that. Parking on 13th Street for the memorial service of a poet I cannot accept is gone. I have been trying to imagine the thieves finding my favorite fake fur hat, the old nightgown with tiny blue flowers, the 15-year-old bathing suit, underpants, toiletries, nothing else in the bag they took from my trunk but a picture of my grandson I can't replace, receipts that meant I had to shut down 3 accounts, and the newly autographed book of poems of the famous poet whose latest work I had not yet read. The woman who died was not so famous, but just as fine, and she didn't exactly believe in bad luck. She would have said 13 is the footprint of the lunar calendar we let go when Rome took over. Not bad luck, except insofar as all politics can be. I am seeing the thieves who do believe in bad luck, bored and baffled at what a poet would carry, the absence of money or jewelry. I hear their curses on a park bench near the Hudson River, near whatever dump they used for whatever they didn't want. I am inventing the poems I have not yet seen from the book they are reading to each other for lack of anything else to do in their rage at the meager hall. I imagine the words this great moral Horatian anti-war Jewish patrician poet would have written in this mean time of explosions unleashed. The naked body of Hussein, eyes crazed with hiding underground, emerges from the darkness. I imagine the awful turning in his mind, the difference between that and being buried alive as he first appears to us in capture, like a bearded, naughty boy with a pixelated nether beard obscured. The words of the poet I have lost, the one who has died, marry the words of the poet whose book has been stolen. The gobbets of flesh, Hagar's and Sarah's offspring, are flowering blood in an open market near Herzliya in a friendly restaurant. I am reading the lines over the shoulder of the thieves, sneaking up on them, leaning on the flat flannel shirt one of them wears so I can move my pen more smoothly to tell the loss. This gentle woman who only tried to earn a living with music in her voice and a fear of all misuse. How power means the poor have fewer mammograms, how nanoseconds do not matter in the way cancer cells reproduce. How her husband misses his beloved with no chance to hold her again. How well they knew each other. How well they let us in. Turn to us as I turn to my grandson whose picture was taken. Swoop him in my arms as we whoosh down the slide, holding hope for this evil time he has chosen to enter the world. How am I doing for time? Oh.
10 more minutes.
Oh, okay. All right. When I think of evil times, I go back to my childhood, and what happens when I do that, I think of the worst evil, is that I always turn to the heroes that I knew. I was privileged as a kid. After school Hebrew lessons, 1947 to 52. I think this will be self-explanatory, except that you may not know that in the Jewish tradition, in the Orthodox Jewish tradition, women cannot perform prayers with the men. They are entirely separate, and therefore they're never taught the official prayers that are done in the synagogues. After school Hebrew lessons, 1947 to 52. The principal came to tell us every year, be careful of Mrs. Isakovic, who had lost everyone. Don't give her any trouble. And we did not. In awe at her hennaed hair, her turquoise and magenta long-sleeved suits, her way of sitting on the desk, legs crossed and high-heeled shoes, so much more fashion-loving, so much more in love with life than our mothers, who did not have to make up for years of what we called rags and camps. Her body moved toward and away from us as she intoned the Hebrew sounds she had learned from listening in on her brother's lessons. The principal said she kept the spirit on the woman's side of those who stayed alive safe by leading them like a rabbi in prayers, singing that went beyond belief, doing something for everyone there no other woman could do, in a ritual language we were meant to learn, and she was not supposed to know. So I'll take you in a different place from down to up. It's called How to Take an MRI. We're getting now into sort of denser places, but we're still in this space where anything can happen, and this literally is how I got through my first one, and it's a report, sort of like that dream poem, How to Take an MRI. When you visit the kingdom of the dead, do not expect silence. Here, in this white metal mummy case, we enter, living, breathing in darkness. We are all put back to one sacked shape in order to get a look at our original bone. The old mummies knew there would be music and feasting and took with them into the deep lyres and their players, brought along just for the purpose of keeping up the old sounds. Listen then, for distant drummers who have made each of us walk our own way. You can hear in this narrow apse echoes of singing after the choir has gone home. Even our soft organs make barriers to the tapping, currents exploding like seeds we cannot hear, pine nuts leaving their cones, scattering to make more scented, bristled trees. Think of the branches speaking among themselves in a breeze. Think of seaweed holding conversation with coral. small fish nuzzling the reef with small percussive sounds. Think of your ribs as a ship's prow, your limbs and their joints telling a kind of grammar, the articulation of paragraphs that extend with complete clarity to the far outreaches of small toes and fingers. These are the original rattles that make music we cannot hear in our ordinary walking. But in this tube that holds each of us too close, like a giant uncle who refuses to know our smallness and our fears, think far away from your body. Remember the kobo drummers of Japan rising at dawn to a gong that will set them to their practice, beating and beating their instrument in unison, in harmony, in syncopation together, after their first quiet meal in daylight, after stretching, after dancing the rhythms of the sun and wind into their bodies, as the sea beyond the rocky cliff sends its accompanying waves to the shore. Well, since my mind does these little riffs, it happened recently as I went up the stairs to use one of the magazines in this library. And I think probably all of you have an image of the Duchamp staircase, the woman descending the staircase. She's naked and she's very formal and walks with great dignity. And I was ascending the staircase, but this is what happened to me as I did that. In the new library, while climbing the stairs, Princeton, 2004. Not naked, like a woman in a painting, not even thinking about being seen, noticing instead the glass barriers placed so no one falls while gazing at the staircase, the architecture that calls attention to itself like a naked woman walking in a public space on a staircase, trying not to think of this fancy architecture that will not let one not notice it even during mild exertion. This is a library. I am ascending the staircase. How will it be to come down after finding the words I am looking for, knowing they are there? The great joy of capture without killing in a library. This is a library where I have come all my life to lose myself in a book, and on the way this staircase I must climb, and the glass barriers that are green seen from the side, strong glass, thick, the kind called plate. Plate glass is green seen from the side, though perhaps not to a spider or caterpillar, but to the human eye, green, like water in a pool, but greener, less blue, definitely not there, and not white, like egg white, which is originally transparent but gooey like heavy, messy air. Still, as a color, egg white is, before cooking, not there, clear and distinctly not green, like this green glass I have loved all my life for making me feel cool as after a swim on a hot day, cool and ready for musing, like this confusing rift taking place where, while I climb the library stairs. Because she's the patron saint of any woman poet in America, I have a very odd poem that's very old about Emily Dickinson, and I will read it and then one other close. They told us in journalism class Emily Dickinson and figures in headlines matter. 23,000 people are celebrating the 100th anniversary of Coca-Cola, only a month after 1,846 people came together for 2 days to celebrate Emily Dickinson, who died the year Coke was born. And though she was effervescent and might have been a solitary sipper, I doubt somehow she would have liked the taste, surely not enough to risk staining her white clothes. The bubbles on her tongue cannot be bottled even by a genie, as they had a penchant to travel naturally from oblique regions where feeling and state of mind change elements. Soda downtown or on a porch with friends, this is a social occasion after all, not exactly to change the drink or cup of tea. Love affairs of the mind carried on in one-sided fountaining without daily sightings, though they arrange a life and govern the steadiness of wonder and reserve, the heightened significance of language, the erotic discharge of a dash accomplished with a pen stroke, do not lead to espresso taken on a Roman piazza or in a Sunday shop, Coca-Cola in the New England Village Green. Rainy days I keep as busy as I can, not to fall backward into dreaming. I can see her staring down into the flanged glass, the dark liquid pointed with silver on which a face sad and pensive floats. And then a last poem. A woman singing the blues while cleaning house in Detroit. Back to that landscape. Whenever I have to do the most ordinary things, I remember the great women, Ella, Bessie Smith, singing their way through to fame. Take this Detroit dust I grapple weekly with lemon oil and bafflement, how it brings back my friend's mother saying the way it comes, its tub scum thickness, is like nowhere else. Didn't know why, she always said, but it had to be the river and the lake mixing themselves up in the factory smoke. As I use the sponge brush to lift cat hair and dust from the surfaces of couch and chair and throw rug, I imagine if I were a biologist, I would study fur, why it stops growing at a certain length and hair does not, what in a fur cell says enough, when my hair presses on and requires me to go to the hairdresser whose conversation is of flowers and how long it has taken the scientists to find cures for cancer so many friends now have. Even there, in the hairdresser's chair, cleanup and song move together. I'm leaning back, head wet, Sinatra crooning forever on the radio. I imagine if I were a composer, I would write a coda to a symphony with some new sound, like the held rhythms of Mr. Blue Eyes, a bell with honey in its call, anything at all to ring a small change that lasts. I say the days I make clean the borders and surface of a life that veers and teeters on a moving river, disordered, tended, and unseen. I often come on it from behind like this, my own life, seeing it whole in a moment, like a river barge in a storm, or more like driving on a Detroit city street full of green and rubble and hearing clear and private in some set-back house in the trees, a woman singing the blues in full and perfect voice.
And they're days of celebration, days of Thanksgiving. And this poem is called Peace Day. In the theater of war, the strong fight the strong for possession of the weak, with victors deciding the last names of the peons or whose ideology will dominate the scene. The art director has created for either side the same look. Fields pockmarked with by powerful projectiles, shattered steel, sprawling bodies, fringes of flame, wisps of smoke, trees crunched like cornflakes. You will never meet the director of the scene. The captain is long since dead, his body parts scattered a few streets away. Severed limbs, slivers of bone, sightless eyes, and guts, all over the place. The producers of the war are nowhere to be seen in this theater. They and their children are in a secure mountain redoubt, one of the privileges of crony capitalism or dictators' favor. They still control the strength and wealth of the nation and decide who serves where. Cynically, they mount the slogans about war, glorious war, all the while tending only their own gardens. You are unhinged by the odor, the excrement of frightened young men and women. Theirs, ours. Is there a difference? Then the maggots come. Maggots are equal opportunity eaters. The artificial names humans give nations or categories of race or religion have no meaning for them, nor do distinctly tailored uniforms with a buckle or a button shining through the Cape mud, daubed darker with each gasp by blood oozing out. The coagulated life mass on which the maggots feed, each shallow gasp bringing battered bodies closer to breathlessness. Maggots are God's creatures too. Do they thank him for each war's feast day?
Okay, this is Tonka. It's called Open Wide and say, I am a cherry in your mouth, but your tongue does not taste my sweetness. It probes for the broken tooth, for the old pain it misses. Thank you.
Log Cabin Love Song. Every 4 weeks, I long for a cabin in Maine, a place in the woods where we paint and write poems on papyrus and peace. Into my log home, I admit no liars or cheaters or thieves, only persons who prefer to paint and write poems on papyrus and peace. As such, I have no comment, only you. In the absence of painting, you can read. In the absence of television, you can walk. You could use the exercise. You can contemplate pines. Our marriage will mushroom like lichen in April. I can see it now. I will not dust. You will not curse. Only the chimney will smoke.
Thank you. This first one is called My Grandfather's Pain. My grandfather's pain is measured on the dashboard of his Ford. It's only 3 miles, he tells me, from home to where my mother is buried. And this next one is called Baby. How does the borderless country of your heart fit in your tiny, tender body?
This one's called A Poor Man's Perception of Politics in the World. An addict, addicted to a reality that leaves me shaking my head, having to play so many games and sewing up holes of where everyone's bled. All that sappy lost innocence that I let ooze into love poems to hide those scars that tar the pureness of one's soul. I'm just trying to live a pure and romantic life, be a romantic, but truth be told, there's only one life that I know, and if this one's beautiful, I'm not sure that I want anymore. For although I don't always live in that dream, believe in those stories I see on TV and the assuredness of people who talk about how life is perfect. Because if there's one thing I've learned in this life is that to most people on the other side of the tracks, hate to say it, but your life ain't worth shit. And that road we seem to be walking down now won't change any of it. Although maybe if people drew expression throughout times like they had swords, we could have put an end to the wars and started to talk about how we went down this bloody road. Because if you look at any successful social revolution that's taken place, it's been with nonviolence. That was the solution. But addiction is a part of human nature. Fiending for some truth that feels like it wasn't watched on TV, the hollowed words of politicians trying to make me believe that we're free to do whatever it is we want. The only freedom we kind of have is to talk, because as anyone in this room knows, to do what you really want in life is going to cost. And people seem not to mind spending a lifetime trying to acquire and hoard an abstract object that ain't going to do anything for you when you expire. If all you had was the plastic, you couldn't even start a fire. It now burns in an Iraqi desert where a soldier from Trenton wonders how he ended up in this. All he wanted was a free education, but the only thing he's been taught is that he needs to kill to live. And how about that mother of an Iraqi insurgent? Neither of them knew where New York was. All they both really know now is that they're the ones dropping the bombs, and I guess I'm a traitor for saying that that might actually give him a cause, a reason to hate, a reason to be addicted to another man's words that give the blame, addicted, the same thing that rules our games, lifted the floodgates of shame that wash the valleys of all lost souls that stand there waiting for something or anything to come along and guide us to a view. To feel that there is something more out there that speaks to you, but I hate to break the news to you tonight, because all you got right now are regurgitated words of a mediocre poet that linger hollow and echo in this room. Because when I leave the stage tonight, I'm just like the rest of you, turning my cheek, holding my tongue when I should speak, laughing with injustice and wondering if I should cry, hugging a friend whose brother was a soldier just died, but instead I'm addicted, fiending for silence and serenity when I should be on the street corners preaching what I think. Instead, I leave it to sound bites of middle-aged Reaganites who wish they knew how to act. And Schwarzenegger, that's just going to show how contemporary politics is becoming very sad. Because all the money these cats raise for their campaigns could give a lot of shit back to the community or rebuild the building that's been bombed. Instead, they rent out decadent halls that gives the upper tier the opportunity to whisper their cause into our ears that the game is clear. Those with the most money are the ones who run politics. They pay for the candidates to be seen. And the green colors the words on the teleprompters where most our leaders speak. And keep in mind that no matter what season it is, the bush is always green. And Democrats, don't think you're any better. When's the last time anyone from my generation really had a leader? I mean, Clinton was cool, and even though it was GOP, Reagan had imagery, and Jesse gets mad props because his speeches sounded like poetry. But I'm still waiting to be inspired. A preacher on a pulpit telling me about a fire that has burned, it's called equality, and it's what humankind has yearned for throughout the history of time. And if you think we're even close to being there, you're living in a dream. I'm waiting for another king to rise and start educating the masses on why we can't wait. Because like a prophetic reverend once said on an ominous night in Memphis, I may not be there when we get to the mountaintop. And you know what I fear? Having to walk up the stairway to heaven and tell them I didn't get the chance to see it either. They still don't know what it's about. And there's Mahatma Gandhi standing behind him. And I have to tell them that Pakistan and India are still in Kashmir duking it out. And no words are being spoken by anyone, it seems, that could put the fires out. Because I guess we're addicted to telling ourselves that we're different. And only some deserve that dream, and those that can't afford it, well, I don't care how poor you are, anyone can save up for a TV. So when you go home tonight, maybe you hear those famous lines, home of the free, land of the brave. You know the way I look at it? Home of iniquity. I have to live this lie. Thank you.
Yeah!
What a wonderful night. We're so privileged to do this.
Oh.
I'd love to take 1 second to invite you all to Cool Women Light Warm Fires. We're going to Stonebridge for the first time at Montgomery next to the 1860 house on Friday the 5th of November. And this is a poem about November. My daughter Catherine was born the morning after JFK was killed. And that was a president I loved. The hospital was full that night of mothers come to term too soon, mourning the young president. A nurse brought masks for tears, scribbled nothing in her chart. 6 contractions, Catherine in my arms. Less time than it had taken him to die, and certainly less pain.
Unfortunately, it's the Trent. But is this going in the Trent Network TV?
Princeton.
I'm sorry for that. I hope it's not. Anyway, if you like what I do, I have a couple CDs out for sale. One's called From Mouth to Mouth to Babes. The other is called Shadow Boxing Round 8. One has 50, and for 2 it's $15. So if you like what I do, I have that for sale. Because this is what I do for a living. I take poetry very seriously, and it saved my life. And just want to say hi. I'm here for poetry. I will not tell you what my nationality is or religion. See why I alienate you, right? Because it shouldn't and doesn't matter. I'm also here and continue to hone my art to get away from the perils of most of mankind's blasphemous behaviors of the world. Because maybe I'm just delusional. But I'm here for the art of poetry. Your stance of how you vote is not for me to slap you in the face. I don't care. Man has always and will always, from the beginning of Cro-Magnon to Neanderthal, will always be a warlike creature. So vote for Carrot Top. That's my stance on that. That's why I'm a poet, not a comedian, because that was meant for comedic reasons. And I didn't. There's a chuckle. Okay. Oh, there's a chuckle. I'd like to perform to you just tonight one of my pieces, and then do what's called random explosions, and do it within trichnosis. Hopefully it's not too long. Suspended the slicing cave, a shriek of pregnant automobiles yammer aesthetically with daring breed. Smell the freezing sun, gunmetal airs out against foul postures from the lizard's quench. Gathering snakefoot saint trails around its kingdom to quit this drawn moor. Stealing winds of purple skies, Omaha incapacitates a laughter to us all. Paralyzed by nonfiction, amazed at the blind hieroglyphics. In the dungeons of old St. Michael's bleached and strangled walls, as the water bites the noxious vertebrae, urge a tomb to settle amongst father's pecking scars, rage a heaping teaspoon, axe to grind on one more mistook hiccup, pounding the ground harder on a dream against these bruised lilies. Flare the white flecked eyes of that wasp, ephedrine marathons, now rise the black star that I'm hidden behind, for it's not the wounds we inflict upon ourselves that hurts the worst. It's the scars which pains us forever to never let us forget. Me, the masked machine of fire reflected in human overtones, felt like the meteor had fallen from the ceiling of Donegal. Omaha anticipates a falling to us all. These lion eyes celebrate piano lessons on searching for your key to open brilliant doors, drooling around dumb, dusty keyhole wonderlands to riot a crave as a kickstand soldier puts out our last strip of honey of merciful stung. I'm watching your fly twitch on atomic blues. I'm watching it. Lying in a deathbed of knowing too much, gazing up with madness of a punk cheek. From the great west I wane to bathe in its sieve. See, so das Blatt. Omaha decapitates a disaster to this all. Go to sleep. It's best we see our stars through coma radio. Do I have time to do one more? Okay, if you like what I just did, got the CD, and this goes on television. I don't mind everybody calling me out so you don't have to edit me. 609-393-3384.
To perform after such a performers. My first, I was short poem, so I may have to read more than one. I don't see any people in my age here. You're mostly younger crowd. So I'll just... Thank you. Good memories, I have many. A good memory I do not have. Good memories crowd my shrinking years. Let me thank you before my memory fades. This one was the first poem in English that I ever published a few years ago. The living past. Living things die, but the dead past lives on furnished in men's memory we call history. Belfast to Beijing, Kashmir to Kosovo, Hiroshima to Hebron, Sri Lanka to Sarajevo. Open sores of words long dead, and deeds we dread, feed poisons unseen, a virus in our being. The living past keeps killing the living. Like most people in the modern day, I grew up believing that as civilizations advanced, they went from the notion of many gods and goddesses to ultimately one God, or as I say about a Unitarian friend of mine, at most one God. And then in recent years, I've come to rethink my position. I hope the feminists in this crowd would appreciate that more. It's called Trimurti, three faces of God. Trimurti simply means three sculptures or three faces. From his holy high, the preacher spoke, all men are equal, here on earth as in heaven. Women, he said, are not men. It was then I went out looking for Trimurti, the God with three faces, male, female, genderless. I had first seen in childhood in Elephanta caves of the coast of Bombay. Portuguese soldiers a few hundred years before me used this god and other such sculptures for target practice.
One poem. It's called The Unicorn. Unicorn spelled with an A, not with an I. Unicorn. I saw a unicorn once at the big circus. The Cole brothers, I think it was. I was only something like 7, and it was really just something like a goat, a mutant, a sitcom version of Myth, real ugly. Hardly the silver horse I knew from books. Something, somewhere inside me, hesitated while the crowd applauded. In the 11th grade, I was the only one who wrote "No blood for oil" on my desk in calc class with peace signs in all the O's. One day I got shouted down, hollered at until I cried mercy in the lunchroom. But I'd seen that unicorn for sure. It rode in a red and gold cart pulled by 4 great white elephants that left dung for a black man in green coveralls to shovel into brown barrels. In red and blue, the ringleader sparkled his white grin, and I wanted to blow up in disappointment. But that image of the unicorn sticks with me. On the news tonight, I saw it ring the ring with something almost like pride, looking something like an old textbook sketch of the Jersey Devil, that bastard come back to spread its embarrassment, being less a symbol of divine truth than a farm animal gone wrong, or albatross. Shaggy and deaf, it sat on its haunches, its single mutated, gnarled horn raised up before the crowd like a flag without wind, a gushing tower of crude oil, the vulgar smoke of smoldering cities. I saw the unicorn bare its teeth and shake its head like an impertinent child, one whose honesty cannot be denied. We're lost and slack-jawed, more shocked than awed. Unicorn, twisty manipulation, like you, I will not stop being ugly.
Yeah.
This is called Kid Dreams. Sometimes I think I'm supposed to just be alone, be a wanderer with no laptop, car, or cell phone, forgo those childhood dreams of my own homebred Italian soccer team, because maybe they'll never find me. So I'll follow my other kid dreams, and I can go to the safaris of Africa and teach English, though far it seems. And I'll learn Swahili and sing to them my dreams. In English, they'll sing go, 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 and chant till they tire, while I dance in circles and get lyrical in front of the fire. Mimi farahi sana. I'm very happy. Barefoot children mocking me with their rhymes, but perhaps that is my life, another day, another time, or maybe I'll go to Europe and discover my family tree, see where Mom and Dad came from, an Italian life that could be. He said, teach English to them, though hard it seems. And I'll learn Italian and paint them my dreams. In English, they'll ooh and ah, and cheer as I rhyme, while I write on the walls of an old building and say in time, Oggi è il giorno che scrivo la mia anima. Today is the day I write my soul. Sandalfoot children and the day being me, perhaps that is my life, another time, another she. Yet sometimes, I think I'm supposed to just be alone, be a wanderer with no laptop, car, or cell phone. But maybe I'll still be in the USA, skip out on the East Coast and the good old NJ, maybe Colorado, climb Rocky Mountain so high, or really West Coasted in Cali with Fred, my Apple guy, and meet Steve Jobs or someone in between, and go to one infinite loop and be part of the scene where technology rocks, and thinking different isn't obscene. Or maybe I'll have that house, that different dream, maybe 6 boys and a pair of girl twins in between, my own homebred Italian soccer team, and a BMW with an iPod in the dash and a pull around back. Sometimes it just seems so simple to me and so matter of fact. Or maybe I'm all wrong. I'm just chasing kid dreams. Because on the way to one you can get lost and things become something other than what they seem. And that's when I think I'm supposed to just be alone. Be a wanderer with no laptop, car, or cell phone. Thank you.